So welcome to the ARDENNE Cleantech Conversation with a special focus on perovskite cell and module development. It's a pleasure to be here. Juliane, thanks for hosting this session here in Freiburg at Fraunhofer ISE on your campus. And before we are coming to the details, I would like to give the floor to you for an introduction of yourself. From what I know is that you're heading at least 2 research groups. So Dr. Juliane Borchert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm a physicist by training, and here in Freiburg, I'm splitting my time between the University of Freiburg and Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy Systems, where I lead connected research groups. So I have a research group at the university and here at Fraunhofer ISE, and together we work on furthering the next generation of solar cells, especially perovskite silicon tandem solar cells is our focus.
Juliane, this brings me to my first question in this session. I assume you're well connected within the science, industry, academia in general. And I could assume from day to day you meet up with young entrepreneurs or people who want to run up their business as a spin-off project or as a young company already. So since you're an expert in this field, what could be or what are your major 3 recommendations or major 3 hints you would like to give them on their endeavor to success, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, the perovskite field has been a really active research field for quite a while and is now also attracting a lot of interest by entrepreneurs, by companies who want to get involved. And what I often see as the first hurdle is really working out where in the production chain and the value chain you actually want to be situated with your new company. So I see a lot of startups that have like a very general, like, oh, we're going to be a perovskite company. And I then always wonder, well, what does that mean? Are you actually going to make a full solar cell, which involves a lot of hardware development? Or do you have one particular step where you want to get involved, maybe even in the final deployment phase? So I think working out what the niche is, what the actual topic is you want to address, because it is quite a big range that people could be focusing on. So I think that's the first step, really knowing what are you bringing, what are you wanting to do. And this can sometimes take a while. I mean, it's fine if the initial setup shifts and so on, but I always find it challenging to even really connect with new startups when I don't understand what they're trying to do. So I'm sure that's similar then also for other people they are trying to connect with. So I think that's really key, working out where in the value chain you are. And then the other point is also to really understand well what's already out there, both in academic research, but also in terms of other companies. There's quite a lot of activity from startups and from more established companies. So it's really valuable, I think, for new startups to spend a lot of time on working out what's already out there and how they can then fit in.
Thank you. Yeah. This brings me to my next question, Juliane. Where do you see the perovskite PV in general, especially the manufacturing, in the next 2 years?
The next 2 years is an interesting timeline. I think the question would be easier if it was like in 10 years or something like that, because we're at a really crucial stage right now where a lot is shifting and a lot is still unclear, which is really exciting because we can still shape a lot, but it also means it's hard to make a prediction. So what I'm seeing is that there is real interest in manufacturing, both from established companies and from startups. Some of them have been around for a while as well, so they have established quite a lot of experience. I don't know if 2 years is the timeline when we will really already see a large volume of commercial product actually available, because there are still a lot of challenges to be resolved in terms of stability, in terms of the exact details of the manufacturing and so on. So I think the next 2 years are going to be really crucial, but I don't think we will necessarily have completely ready product already.
Is there another time horizon you would like to see or you would like to recommend when we can see finally a final product?
So I have been doing this cheeky thing where I made people give me bets on what the solar market would look like in like 10, 15 years. Because currently the solar market is very much dominated by single junction silicon. And the question really is, are we going to get a full transition? And someone I was talking to about this pretty boldly said it's going to be all or nothing. So in 10, 15 years, when this technology needs to have matured and be the market leader, either it has done that and is there, or it hasn't, and we're still at single junction silicon. So I think that's an interesting timeline. The kind of 10 years would be enough time to mature and become the actual next big thing in industry. And if the problems we still have now have stopped it from doing that, that will be the point where we will see that there is not a significant market share and it hasn't actually made it into market.
Okay, yeah, very interesting point, Juliane. Thanks. You already have mentioned right now different technologies, single junction, such as also maybe tandem already. This brings me to my next question, especially in regard to the geographic differentiation. How could we here, I would say in the Western Hemisphere, could differentiate from these very strong activities, especially in the East, in countries such as be China, Japan, maybe also South Korea, a little bit Taiwan. So where could we be really strong in here in Europe?
So I think every new technology, be it in our case perovskite silicon tandems or perovskite single junction solar cells, is a new opportunity to deal the cards anew of who will actually be leading in this. I think we have a really strong base in Europe, for example, where we have a lot of know-how. A lot of the big research labs that work on this are here. We therefore have a lot of skilled people who did their theses, like master theses and things like that within those labs. So we have a lot of knowledge around. And I think it's going to be really key how we're utilizing that and how this actually becomes an industrial product. So I do think it's a great opportunity to kind of redeal the cards, but it's not straightforward because technology advancement on a kind of geographic level where that happens is tied to knowledge, but it is also tied to policy and the frameworks around and whether you have the right environment to set up a new company and things like that, which can be a struggle. So I think it might not be a strong distinguishing and like, oh, one region tends to more produce this kind of product or more this kind of product. I think it's more going to be about where do we maybe have to also bring production closer to demand. So this is a big discussion happening at the moment with kind of lots of supply chain disruptions and so on of like, is it good to be shipping everything this far? Do we want more local production and so on? So I think technology-wise, a lot is happening in Europe and in the US as well. Question is, can that actually be transferred to industry? And that to some degree is tied to industrial policy of different governments as well.
Okay. Do you think that you can confirm the hypothesis that there are maybe a little more activities on single junction and maybe 4-terminal activities in the Eastern Hemisphere than in the Western Hemisphere? Are there any dependencies depending on the geographic location that you can say, for instance, in the West there are more 2T, 4T activities, and in the East more single junction activities? Is that something that you observe?
I do think that because there is a lot of silicon experience at research institutes in Europe, the idea of building a silicon perovskite tandem is quite attractive because that really nicely combines two expertises. So I think there is a lot of tandem activity in the Western Hemisphere. I think in the Eastern Hemisphere, there is maybe a bit more diversity in those activities. So there is still some tandem activity, but also, more single junction activity as well. So I think there is a bit of a trend there with tandem being quite strong in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Juliane, this brings me to my next question, more going away from the market towards the technology. And since we have already seen at the Perovskite scale opening yesterday, your contribution, your presentation, I would like to touch a little bit more the deposition route of the absorber. So what do you think, what manufacturing route, especially talking about hybrid, full dry, or wet, are the most promising ones, especially for scaling up technologies in the perovskite cell manufacturing?
This is another topic where there's still a lot of diversity in terms of approaches. So we have to make a lot of thin films to make a good perovskite solar cell, and one of them is the actual perovskite absorber. And there you can kind of see the approaches where people are going for a fully wet chemical process with solvents, which works great in the lab. It's really quick. You can quickly put additives. It's also something we have done for quite a while because it really helps to quickly test different materials. So it definitely has its place in the lab. But outside of that, the question really becomes, do you want to be handling large amounts of solvents? Can you actually do the thin film deposition uniformly? To my knowledge, there's no major thin film technology for semiconductors that is deposited from solution. Everything at the end of the day that is in industry and needs thin film semiconductors is in some shape or form vacuum deposited. So there just isn't a lot of precedent. So I think there's still a lot to be done. If your vision is to build a flexible roll-to-roll, high throughput deposition, then maybe solution processing is attractive, but you do still need to be able to actually make consistent thin films on a large scale with a solution process that is quite challenging. So for what we're aiming at, which is tandem solar cells on silicon, we are favoring much more vacuum-based methods because we cannot profit from the kind of roll-to-roll flexible thing anyway because it's a stiff wafer that we're working on. And also, we want to cover the pyramids of the silicon wafers uniformly, and that you can really only do consistently with vacuum methods. So we focus quite strongly in my group on vacuum deposition, both by itself and in combination with solution processing. So we also use a hybrid approach where we deposit the inorganics first with a vacuum process and then kind of avoid having to deal with the organics in vacuum and do them in a separate solution process step. So that's the route, the hybrid route that we're focusing here at Fraunhofer ISE. At the university side, I'm also trying out some other evaporative approaches, but for tandem solar cells, that seems to be a quite promising approach to go with at least a partial vacuum deposition.
Thanks for those insights, Juliane. Very helpful. Still staying within the vacuum route and talking about the hybrid route. Once I'm visiting different conferences around the globe, around the world, I always recognize that I don't know anything, basically, because trends are changing especially from a co-evaporation towards a sequential evaporation or vice versa. So what is your take on this? What could be a scalable process within the vacuum deposition, a co-deposition or a parallel deposition, especially of the inorganics? What are your experiences, Juliane?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time doing co-evaporation during my PhD, which was fine in the lab, but already there had its challenges because the organics, so in our case, formamidinium iodide, are challenging to evaporate, at least in the small scale evaporators that we were dealing with. And so there already problems emerged, and there's quite a bit of literature where people are kind of complaining about this, where not often in the main part of the paper, but often in the supplementary information, there's like, oh, we struggled to adjust the rate, so we had to use the pressure as a control for our rate because the rate monitors weren't working, and like all kinds of complications like that. There's also question marks about maybe the material breaking apart and things like that. So it's a bit challenging for evaporation. So I think in terms of a production line, ideally, you just want to have one type of process. So you can just have a big, let's say, vacuum line and just drive your samples through that, and you don't have to go in and out of different environments. So ideally, we would want to evaporate everything. But right now, we're really struggling with the FAI side of it. So doing the hybrid route is more straightforward for us because there we can do it separately. We can kind of take the best of both worlds, deal with the organics in solution and deal with the inorganic materials in vacuum. So my preference would be a full evaporation process. We're just struggling to really get it to work, and I haven't seen clear evidence that other people are doing much better on it. I mean, there's lots of companies who don't publish what they're doing, so I don't know. Maybe they've worked it out, but we are still looking at it, as I said, on the university side. We are trying more full evaporation approaches, both sequential and co-evaporation, but the hybrid route for the moment is our working horse because there we can kind of deal with the two problems separately.
All right. So Juliane, I'm coming towards more to the light side of the cell. So the next question would be in regard to the recombination and transport layer. Do you still think that the especially atomic layer deposition is the right choice for a damage-free deposition, especially once you want to scale up a cell production?
Yeah, so the challenge we have is that the perovskite layer is not the most robust thing in the world. It's not like a silicon wafer that is pretty inert. It does react with all kinds of things. It gets damaged by all kinds of processes. So to some degree, ALD became popular in research because, you were able to make a film without destroying your underlying perovskite. So for scaling, that's much more challenging because ALD is not exactly a super fast process. There are some approaches now with spatial ALD and so on trying to make it faster, but it's still, in terms of throughput, a bit limited, and you need pretty, complex precursors and so on. So it's not an ideal process for scaling, definitely. I think the challenge is going to be what else is really damage-free enough to not destroy the films. On the other hand, is ALD really damage-free either? Because we often have water precursors in there and things like that, which are not necessarily great for the films either. So it's something we're really actively exploring, trying out different things. The moment in the lab, we still do a lot of ALD because that's kind of easy for the small scale. For the large scale, there are definitely question marks on whether that will really make it into industrial skills.
Thanks for these insights, Juliane. This brings me also to my next question, since we are talking about bottlenecks already maybe, and I would say maybe ALD could be a bottleneck within a scalable production. What are the three major bottlenecks from your expertise, be it in cell or module manufacturing for perovskite BV? Is it something that refer more to an equipment supplier or to a material supplier? are these topics that refer maybe to metrology suppliers, or as maybe a general inert handling topic, to handle lifetime critical substrates and materials? What are the major 3 bottlenecks to be successful in perovskite cell and module development?
So we are at the moment setting up the perovskite silicon scale technology platform, where we bought all this big kind of industrial equipment and are really piecing that together. And some bottlenecks that we've experienced there are related to some of the kind of very specialized organic molecules people like to use in research papers, like the self-assembling molecules, some of the other HTL materials that are being used, that it's fine if you pay a lot per microgram for a research lab, but you cannot do that if you have to fill an evaporation source in our case, because you need a minimum amount in there and things like that. So some of the, let's say, more exotic molecules that are in the literature, even if they're great in terms of passivation and things like that, they're not really affordable for a large scale. And this is partially because there hasn't been a demand, so no one has scaled this, but it's also partially because it's just complex to synthesize them. So even at scale, it would still be fairly expensive. So that's a question mark for us at the moment of, there's still so much influx in terms of contact layers. So many different ones are being used. So which one to really optimize for, which one to really scale and try to make affordable and so on. That's definitely one problem. The other problem is about the rates and throughputs of basically everything. Like almost every process, we have to check, okay, can we actually do this fast enough? And some processes we were able to borrow from other technologies, from silicon, for example. So TCO deposition is pretty established how to do that quickly, and like that's fine. We can buy solutions for that and do that. But with some of the other layers, it's like, okay, is this actually going to be fast enough if we would do this at full speed?
Thanks for this insight, Juliane. So this brings me already to my last question. Where do you see yourself, the team, and the Fraunhofer ISE in the next 5 years for perovskite PV?
I think the next 5 years are going to be really exciting for us because we're really at this intersection between a lot of the more fundamental stuff that is still happening in the research world, a lot of this trying out of different contact layers, as I mentioned, but also other things. So there's a lot happening in the research world, but there is also now enough happening in the industrial world that we at Fraunhofer can really bridge that. We really have partners to work with, because, I mean, it's always our mission to work with and for industry. And if there's no interest from industry, then we're just kind of like, hey, we have this thing. Do you want to do that? But that's not the situation we have. The situation we have is there is a lot of interest from a huge variety of different industry players. And it's really nice for us to be able to be that bridge and help with that. So I think next 5 years are going to be very exciting in terms of helping with scaling, with stability, with a lot of the questions we just discussed of how to best match the deposition to the actual target product the company wants to make that we're working with and so on. So I think we're going to be very busy the next 5 years, really helping to bridge that gap.
I agree, Juliane. So thanks for having this conversation here, and thanks for hosting us here with this ARDENNE Cleantech Conversation at the Fraunhofer ISE campus here in Freiburg. It was really a big pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time, and we cross our fingers for for the next 2 or 5 years here for your research on the pilot scale.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you.